So hello world, my name is Amelia, and as promised I am trying to get back on this YouTube trip that I have promised for like the longest time now. Yeah, and ignore the bad background. I know it's been like a few weeks since I promised that video. I've been trying to get back on track, been trying to get my lighting set up right. It's definitely not an easy process when there's just like so much on the backlog you have to work through. I got job issues going on, I got mental health issues going on. So yeah, that is a spoonful. So anyways, being that I have no idea how long it's been since my last video. I am completely oblivious to that, and I know that's probably a problem. I just thought I would do a video kind of giving everyone an intro into my life as it is right now. I tried to record this video like 2 times already. The first time I did it, by the way, if you hear any jingling, that's Jesse over there enjoying my fiance's chair, which that'll be something I'll get to eventually one of these days, maybe not today. The first time that I tried to do this video, I did something all about my faith and my church, which is a big deal. I was also like in a really bad place at that time, so it was hard for me to, oh gosh, that was like 2-3 weeks ago. And then I figured out after the fact, I was like, you know what, I don't think it's time to post that yet. I haven't really talked about the fact that being that I'm going to a church that's not openly supportive of the LGBT community, it is a little hard to talk about, and then not to mention all the people out there who think that I'm crazy for going to a place as that for my church. I can briefly mention that I have this really strong relationship with a psychologist, and I've talked to her about the church issue. And one of the things that came up is I talked about some of the things going on at church, and she was kind of initially like everyone else. She told me that she was kind of in the same realm of thinking, yeah, maybe that's not the place for you. But then I told her my reasons, and just our last session, she said, I gave it some thought and I realized that you are in the right to do this, to be persevering, to be pushing through this. And she even told me, she compliments me all the time about how she's like, you make very wise choices. You do things I don't see in other people, and that was kind of a cool thing. And I will definitely hope that in the future that's something I can talk more about, but for now that was something to skip. Anyways, so I'm just going to try to briefly go over this just to kind of give that where am I today. So I am a woman of trans experience. I like to use that term because of the fact that I hate the fact that there's people who identify as a trans woman. Personally, I don't identify with that. I've lived so much of my life as, feeling wrong in my body, and then getting to a point in my life where I'm like, that's just, I don't know. Some people will probably disagree with me on that aspect too. It doesn't mean I'm disregarding that I'm trans. It just means that I don't identify with that label. And I understand. I can't necessarily identify with the cis label either, but I like to identify with what I am as close as I possibly can. So I started transitioning October 25th of 2018. So this has been going on for about 5 years. About 6 months in, I was married, and me and my ex-wife separated. There's a whole story there, but again, another conversation for probably a time I think it's more appropriate. And that, then we got, by the time, it was a year later after we separated, and a lot had, I was doing fine financially at first. I was not working prior to, so I had to go get myself a job at a local hardware store, and it was fine. I was doing fine. I was kind of being my typical good employee, which I normally am. It's just there's mental health things I got going on that get in the way, and to be honest, I didn't even know about those until later. The year following, the end towards that year, I knew I couldn't financially keep going. I took in a roommate, and then about 3 months after that, I took in a second roommate, and that turned out to, I guess I'm a judge of bad character because I allowed myself to get deceived, particularly with the second roommate. She turned out to be a serial squatter, and that will definitely be something to get into. I don't remember if I've ever said anything about her. I am so surprised that somebody like that can just scathe the law, just keep getting out of the law, and anyways, so then we had the pandemic in 2020, and my life just flew off the rails. Particularly, it happened the worst when the face masks started becoming a requirement, and I even remember asking one of my managers at one point, I was like, hey, because I found out that I had a claustrophobia problem. I didn't even know I had it. And I asked the manager, I said, what are we going to do for the employees who have claustrophobia? You can't just force them to wear a mask. I'm like, there's got to be something the company has to do according to the ADA. And his response was, well, they should just get fired. I was like, oh my gosh, how could you say something so harsh? And yeah, rude employees, rude customers, going through all that stuff. And then we were paying work twice as hard because people now were off work. So, they had to come in to get their mulch and paint during a pandemic. And I worked through that, and then things just got worse and worse from there. I tried to seek out some help through different departments and different managers, and then that was later that year that I was so afraid to get myself checked into for any kind of mental disabilities, but I finally gave up. I had a friend, I was on a video call with a friend, and I couldn't pay attention, and I started crying. And she said to me, have you thought about getting checked out? And I did. I finally made a call. I got in with, oh my gosh, there was such a backlog, like nearly a year waiting for some psychologist who could diagnose it. I finally got in touch with someone. It cost me like $700-800 out of pocket. And when we got to the end of the evaluation, he said to me, he's like, clear as day, you have ADHD. And all of a sudden, it was like my whole life made sense. So much stuff that happened to me as a child, as a teen. It was just like, oh my word. Which, that'll be, again, another thing I need to talk about. I'll have to come back and reference this video and be like, what were all the things I said I need to talk about in the future? So I got diagnosed with that, and then the following year, I did finally get in with a psychologist at Kansas University Hospital, which is local to me. And right off the bat, we talked and evaluated. I got 5 diagnoses for other things right off the bat. I got diagnosed with BPD, borderline personality disorder, which is, I really feel, put down by the fact that 90% of material you can find out there about BPD is just so negative about people like us. It's like just advising other people in our lives, oh, you need to stay far away from people with BPD. Like, you are a true hero if you are going to continue in a relationship. And it's like, I don't need to hear this when I'm somebody who feels so alone. It's a frustrating thing that has definitely come up recently. So I ended up working through that, seeing therapists, psychiatrists, psychology. I started, it also was another hard thing for me but I eventually got on Adderall for my ADHD and it helped. I had already been on Prozac for depression and anxiety, and the list just kept going. And the bad roommate I had, she finally moved out in December. Like, it was almost exactly a year to the day that I finally got her out. And again, long story, I had to basically finally stop reacting to her and ignoring her, and every time that she did something, call the police. And finally, she got bored and scared enough that she finally left on her own. So the following year, it wasn't far into it. I finally got COVID around December of 2020. And I was on top, and then it was, I'm kind of losing track here. I am post-op. I have had my bottom surgery and some FFS, which there's previous videos on my channel here that talks all about those, so not something I necessarily have to cover all over again. I was out of work after my surgery, along with my mental health problems, for about 5 or 6 months. I remember a month before my surgery, I was in such chaos over some things going on at work that I called the work helpline for mental health things, and they just right off the bat told me, they were like, yeah, I think you should take a leave of mental health. And I did. And then I also rolled that over into me having my surgery. I came back end of October. And then I didn't even work a month, and then I got COVID. And then a month after that, it was so, oh my gosh. Then I ended up rolling that into just extending my leave because mentally I couldn't go back. I went back and, and then it was around this time, it turned out that my whole reason that I had these mental problems is because I also at that time found out that I had dissociation disorder. There's no stop to this. I think I'm finally at the end of finding out myself and being like all the things I got problems with and I need to focus on. And I hate to say I have so many problems now. So I went back to work, and then 2 months later, once again, it got bad for me. And by that point, I think I was being forced out of my job because I got written up 2 times. I had worked for the company for 2 years, never been written up. And then when I finally returned, I got written up twice. I went on leave again because I was just like, I know they are going to go throw a third one on me, and that's being fired. So I went on leave again. But this time I just rode the leave out, and they eventually let me go, and I'm like, okay. I eventually ran into an opportunity, because I've always liked the idea of healthcare. I ran into an opportunity of becoming trained as a CNA. I know from this point forward is definitely a lot of stuff I haven't really talked about. I went to a school, it was through Community Service League here in KC. Great opportunity. Through a program, they pay for you to go and get CNA, take CNA training. Kind of sad that a lot of people don't finish it, value of free. But I persevered and I got through it, and I was very proud of that. I got licensed through the state, and shortly after that, I went on to getting a job at St. Luke's Hospital, and it was good. I was working night shift. It was good, and things were fine, but then I just start having these little things happening. Nurses complaining about my attitude, complaints coming even from my preceptor. Like, I don't know where all this stuff was coming through. And I would try to, defend myself and be like, well, I think this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. And it was like there was no forgiveness for this stuff. And it went on and on and on. And then they made it mandatory that everybody had to get their COVID vaccine. And I knew that was going to spell trouble, because I had already experienced long COVID. I already knew that I was dealing with that. Earlier that year when I recovered from COVID, I was wheezing. I couldn't keep my breath. I couldn't work hard. It was a contributor to my working problems. And I just, in the back of my mind, knew this was not going to be good. I got my second dose and my body reacted so bad, I could not go into work. I ended up going on a leave for 1 month. And I even had a doctor fill out a letter saying, yes, she had gotten sick for a month because of the COVID vaccine. And sent it all in. And then I get a call a few days later saying, yeah, according to the leave company, you did not qualify. That was not a valid reason for leave. I'm like, what? You guys know you made it mandatory. I got sick. You know there's people who get sick from it. And it was not a good reason. And they let me go. Let me go. And I come to find out later, after talking to somebody who knew my manager and my preceptor, that they both do this. That I am not the only one who runs into this problem. So, 2 months after that, I worked there for like 4 or 5 months. 2 months after that, I went on to go work for Kansas University. I got a job as a CNA up on HC8, which is their urology oncology unit. It is where our post-op trans patients go following their procedures. I mean, this is worth another video in its own. I really enjoyed the job. It was so much more, I felt so much free. I didn't feel like the nurses were as mean to me, quote unquote. And I really enjoyed it there more. However, things were good. We went through like 3 managers, which was weird. Again, I'm going to make a whole video about that job, especially because this is where I'm kind of up in the air. Things got hard for me about 5 or 6 months in. I even, I was on that unit back in 2020, which was kind of cool. There was even a couple nurses that had remembered me. I could go into so many details, but I'm going to skip that for now. Things started getting hard for me a year in. And it just kind of started turning into a landfall. This was the first time I seeked out accommodations on the ADA. And I went through so much hassle for that, talking to the psychiatrist, trying to get this, trying to get that, letter for this, letter for that, getting this accommodation, but finding it did not quite make what I needed. And then it got to the point where even my manager was like, I suggest you start considering finding another place to go in this hospital. It wasn't that I didn't do well at healthcare. I did great as a CNA. I was great at vitals. I was great. I constantly was getting forms filled out by patients who were saying how amazed they were at my service. I was getting, kudos from my coworkers, the ones that liked me. And she was like, I just think this is probably not the place for you. So I started, I finally, in March, I got in a car accident. I completely just went off the rails, had a disassociation attack while driving to work. I didn't even acknowledge what was happening, and I ran a stop sign and got in a T-bone collision. They hit me. And the next day I went on leave and I started consulting my leave representative, and after a couple months of that, I finally decided I'm not going to go back to my job. I want a job change, and fortunately I found out that that was an accommodation of its own. I could start seeking out a new position without working and still being classified as an internal employee. So I still have an active employment, but paychecks are $0. Technically on leave, it's this whole thing. This past week, I've after fighting with my psychiatrist who just went full stop on me, didn't want to cooperate anymore, I finally threw in some applications, and again, working with my leave representative, we're on track to get that taken care of. And like, I could do a video on mental health, a video on this job. Like, this is where things were really tough for me. Oh, and then there's school. There's school. But I'm going to completely glaze over that for now because that's fun. So that is basically where I am now. And I'll shortly briefly mention, after bad dating, I finally jumped on eHarmony of all websites. I found a guy, we dated long distance for about 9 months, and now he lives with me, and he moved in. We've been doing that for almost 8 months now, and it turned out amazing. So, I'm going to leave this video here. I am so happy I finally did this, and I got it through. It was a little longer than I had hoped, but I am hoping everybody enjoyed this video, and I'm going to try my best to have a background ready to go, and I do have my lights here. Hopefully they're good. You all stay lovely and have an amazing day or week or whatever your life is about. So, bye.